On Christmas Eve, an exhausted woman cleans the floor of a luxurious building while her daughter watches in wonder at the lights of the tree. Unknowingly, a lonely businessman witnesses the scene and is deeply touched by the sweetness in the midst of scarcity. The gesture he makes next changes not only that night, but the entire course of both their lives. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you will hear in your life.
Sarah ran a tired hand across her sweaty forehead as she stared at her distorted reflection in the freshly waxed lobby floor. December 23rd, almost midnight, and she was still here, on her knees, scrubbing the cold Italian marble of the most luxurious building on Park Avenue. The Sterling Financial Building was known for its imposing architecture, mirrored glass that reflected the New York skyline, and an entrance hall that looked more like the reception of a five-star hotel. Her knees ached, her back burned, her hands, red and raw from constant contact with cleaning chemicals, trembled with exhaustion. Sarah was 32, but the bathroom mirror often returned the image of someone at least 10 years older. Not that she had time to look at herself closely in the mirror. Her routine didn't allow for vanity, only survival. Across the lobby, sitting on one of the beige leather sofas near the Christmas tree, Sophie swung her skinny little legs in the air. The 5-year-old wore a faded pink dress, neatly patched at the hem, and a pair of sandals that had been too small for months. But none of that mattered right now. The child's brown eyes were shining, fixed, on the twinkling lights of the decorated tree, on every colored ornament, on every golden ribbon that adorned its branches. Sarah looked at her daughter and felt her chest tighten. This little girl didn't deserve this. She didn't deserve to spend Christmas Eve waiting for her mother to finish her shift, sitting in a cold lobby, hungry and exhausted. Sophie should be at home, sleeping peacefully, dreaming of Santa Claus, waking up the next morning to open presents. But Sarah's reality didn't fit into rosy dreams. Her reality fit into overdue bills, late utility payments, past due rent, and the empty refrigerator waiting for them in their one-room tenement in the South Bronx. The supervisor had let all the other employees go home early that night. It was Christmas, after all. But Sarah had offered to stay. The extra shift meant a few more dollars at the end of the month, and she desperately needed every cent. She had thought about leaving Sophie with her neighbor, Mrs. Davis, but the old woman was already watching her 3 grandchildren, and Sarah didn't have the heart to ask for another favor, so she brought her daughter. Sophie had been quiet the whole time, as she always was, an obedient girl, too mature for her age. Sometimes Sarah caught herself thinking she had stolen her own daughter's childhood. While other kids played, Sophie learned to be silent, to be patient, to wait. Sarah scrubbed harder at a stubborn scuff mark on the floor. The sound of the damp cloth against the marble echoed through the empty lobby. Outside, Park Avenue was still bustling. Cars rushed by, people returned from last-minute shopping, and Christmas lights decorated the store windows. But inside that building, there was only silence, the smell of cleaning solution, and the exhaustion that weighed on Sarah's shoulders like a bag of cement. Sophie let out a small yawn, and Sarah felt a pang in her heart. It was almost midnight, and the girl had been up since 6 in the morning. They needed to leave soon. But Sarah still had to clean the 10th-floor restroom and mop the emergency stairwell. Another hour, she calculated. Maybe an hour and a half. The little girl got up from the sofa and walked over to the tree. She stood on her tiptoes, trying to reach a red ornament hanging from a low branch. Her little fingers brushed against the decoration, making it swing and reflect the colored lights. "Sophie, honey, don't touch that," Sarah said softly without raising her voice. "We can't touch things here, remember?" Sophie immediately pulled her hand back, but kept looking at the tree with that sparkle in her eyes. "Mommy, can't we just have Christmas here?" the girl asked in her thin, tired voice. Sarah felt a lump in her throat. "What? Here? she repeated, trying to buy time to understand what her daughter meant. Yeah, Mommy. There's a tree here, and pretty lights, and even food, Sophie pointed to the trash can near the reception desk, where Sarah knew there were leftover appetizers from the office party held earlier that day. We could just stay here. It would be nice. The girl's words, spoken with such innocence, such lightness, hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. Her daughter was suggesting they spend Christmas in a commercial building because at home there was nothing. No tree, no special dinner, not even enough food. Sarah dropped the cloth on the floor and stood up with difficulty, her joints protesting. She walked over to Sophie and knelt in front of her, gently holding the girl's small shoulders. Sweetheart, we're going home very soon, and it'll be nice there too, you'll see, Sarah lied, forcing a smile. We'll have our own party, okay? But we don't have a tree, Sophie said, not with sadness, but with the resigned acceptance of someone who had already learned that wishes were unaffordable luxuries. And we don't have turkey or panettone. Sarah swallowed hard. She had bought a box of pasta and a can of tomato sauce. That was it. That would be their Christmas dinner. She had thought about doing something special with it. Maybe frying a couple of eggs to go with it. But she knew she wouldn't be fooling anyone. Sophie knew their reality as well as she did. We'll have our dinner our way, Sarah whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. And you know what's most important at Christmas? It's not the food, it's not the tree. It's having the people we love close by. And I have you, my treasure. You're my best present. Sophie smiled, but it was a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. The girl hugged her mother tightly, and Sarah closed her eyes, fighting back the tears. That threatened to fall. At that exact moment, the elevator in the corner of the lobby made a metallic sound, and the doors slid open. Sarah felt her whole body tense. No one was supposed to be in the building at this hour. Security had already made their final rounds. The alarm system would be activated soon. She turned, still holding Sophie, and saw a man step out of the elevator. Tall, broad-shouldered, in an impeccable dark suit with a loosened tie, his black hair showing a few silver strands at the temples. He was carrying a brown leather briefcase and had a tired expression on his face. He must have been in his late 40s, maybe 50. His face had strong features, a sharp jawline. But there was something in his eyes, a coldness, a distance, as if he were always somewhere else, even when he was present. Sarah stood up quickly, pulling Sophie behind her in an instinctive, protective gesture. I'm sorry, sir. We were just leaving, she said hurriedly, her voice trembling. I'll just get my things and... The man held up a hand, a slight gesture for her to stop talking. You don't have to go, he said, his voice deep and calm. I just forgot a briefcase and came back for it. Do you work here? Yes, I do, sir. I'm on the cleaning crew. I was just finishing my shift, Sarah explained, trying to keep her voice steady. This is my daughter, Sophie. I'm sorry for bringing her, but it's Christmas Eve and... She didn't need to finish the sentence. The man's gaze shifted from Sarah to Sophie, who was peeking shyly from behind her mother. There was something strange in that look, a subtle change in his expression, as if a long-locked door had just creaked open a crack. Michael Sterling was the owner of that building, that company, that financial empire with offices in 5 states. He had built it all himself, from the first rejected bank loan to the success that placed him among the most influential businessmen in New York. But success had come at a price that was far too high. He had lost his younger brother Gabriel in a car accident 10 years ago. Gabriel was everything Michael was not. Easygoing, a dreamer, full of life. The loss broke something inside Michael, something that never healed. After that, There was a marriage that fell apart when he discovered his wife was having an affair with his business partner. The betrayal didn't hurt as much as it should have. In fact, Michael barely felt a thing. It was as if his ability to feel had been buried along with Gabriel. Since then, Michael had lived alone in the penthouse of his own building, a 3,000-square-foot apartment decorated by a renowned designer with a panoramic view of the city. But the apartment was cold, empty, a space where he slept a few hours a night and spent the rest of his time working. He had no friends, no family. He only had numbers, investments, meetings, and a loneliness he had learned to ignore. But that night, seeing that exhausted woman on her knees on the floor of his lobby, and that tiny girl looking at the Christmas tree with a mix of wonder and resignation, something inside him stirred. He hadn't come to the building for any briefcase. In truth, he had come down from his apartment because he couldn't stand the silence anymore. He had come down because it was Christmas and he was alone, as always. But this time the loneliness felt heavier than usual. And now here he was, faced with this scene that seemed straight out of a movie. The mother protecting her daughter, both of them looking at him with a mixture of respect and fear. He wanted to say something, but he didn't know what. It had been so long since he'd had a real conversation with someone without talking about business, contracts, or percentages. "Have you two eaten yet?" Michael asked suddenly, surprising even himself. Sarah blinked, confused. "Excuse me? Have you eaten? Have you had anything for dinner tonight?" Sarah hesitated. We're going to eat when we get home," she lied, but her voice was too weak to be convincing. Michael looked at Sophie again. The girl had large, tired eyes, a thin little face, and worn-out clothes. He didn't need to ask anything else. He knew exactly what was waiting for them when they got home. The same thing that wasn't waiting. Nothing. "I live on the top floor," Michael said, pointing to the ceiling with his thumb. "I have leftovers from a dinner that was delivered earlier. I was just going to throw it all out. If you'd like, you can come up and have something to eat. It's Christmas after all." Sarah was frozen. She didn't know this man. She knew he was important, that he owned the company, but she had never spoken to him before. And now he was inviting her and her daughter to have dinner in his apartment? It seemed crazy. It seemed dangerous. "Thank you very much, sir, but we really have to go. It's late and—" "Please," Michael interrupted. And there was something in his voice, a raw sincerity that made Sarah stop talking. "I'm not going to do anything wrong. I just don't want to throw away food. And you look like you could use it. Besides," he looked at Sophie, "it's Christmas. No one should be hungry on Christmas." Sarah looked at her daughter. Sophie's eyes were fixed on the man, curious but not scared. The girl had a good instinct for people, she always had. And Sarah knew she didn't really have a choice. She knew Sophie was hungry, that at home there was nothing but bland pasta. She knew she was too exhausted to make the long trip back to their tenement that night. She made a decision that would change everything. "Okay," Sarah said softly. "We accept. Thank you." Michael felt a strange sense of relief wash over him. "Great. Come on." He walked back to the elevator and held the door open, waiting. Sarah took Sophie by the hand, and the two of them followed him, stepping into the silver elevator that went straight to the penthouse. Sophie squeezed her mother's hand tightly, but she didn't seem scared. In fact, she seemed a little excited. Michael pressed the button for the top floor. The elevator ascended in silence, with only the soft hum of the motor and the instrumental music playing from the speakers. Michael looked at their reflection in the elevator's mirror. The mother had a tense face, marked by distrust and fatigue. The daughter had wide eyes, full of expectation. When the doors opened, Sarah almost gasped. The apartment that revealed itself was something out of a design magazine. Light wood floors, a high ceiling with exposed beams, a huge living room with white sofas, modern art on the walls, and a floor-to-ceiling glass window offering a spectacular view of the illuminated Park Avenue. In the corner of the room, near the window, stood an immense Christmas tree, decorated with silver and gold ornaments, red ribbons, and soft white lights that twinkled gently. There were no presents under the tree, but the tree itself was more beautiful than anything Sophie had ever seen in her life. "Wow, Mommy, look!" Sophie whispered, amazed. "It's beautiful, isn't it, sweetie?" Sarah said, feeling completely out of place in that environment. She had cleaned luxury offices her whole life, but she had never been inside a place like this. She had never been invited to sit on the sofa, to touch things, to be there as a person, not as an invisible employee. "Make yourselves comfortable," Michael said, taking off his jacket and tossing it over the back of a chair. "I'll heat up the food. Have a seat." Sarah sat on the edge of one of the sofas, pulling Sophie onto her lap. The girl couldn't stop looking around, her eyes shining with enchantment. Michael went to the kitchen, a modern space with marble countertops and stainless steel appliances. He opened the refrigerator and found the trays the catering company had left earlier. He had ordered a full Christmas dinner, more out of obligation than desire. It was Christmas, after all, and he thought he should at least have food in the house, even if he had no one to share it with. He put the trays in the oven to warm up and returned to the living room. Sarah was still sitting in the same spot, tense, as if expecting something bad to happen at any moment. Sophie, on the other hand, had climbed off her mother's lap and approached the tree, looking at the ornaments with that same fascinated expression. "You can touch them if you want," Michael said, and the girl looked at him in surprise. "Really?" Sophie asked, her voice full of hope. "Really? It's just a tree." Sophie slowly reached out and touched a golden ornament. The ball swung gently and reflected the light, creating little bright spots on the walls. The girl let out a small, delighted laugh, and Michael felt something strange happen inside him, a warmth in his chest, a feeling he hadn't felt in years. He sat on the sofa opposite Sarah and watched Sophie play with the ornaments. The girl was delicate, careful, as if she knew they were precious and didn't want to break anything. "What's your name?" Michael asked. "Sophie," the girl answered, still looking at the tree. "But everyone calls me Soph." "Soph? That's a nice name. And how old are you?" "5. I'm turning 6 in March." "And do you like school?" There was a silence. Sophie looked at her mother, who looked away. "I don't go to school yet," the girl said softly. Michael frowned. "What do you mean?" Sarah shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. "I haven't been able to get her a spot yet," she said, her voice low and full of shame. "The public schools near our house are all full. I put her name on the waiting list, but they haven't called yet." Michael said nothing, but he made a mental note. A 5-year-old who should be in school and wasn't. More evidence of the harsh reality these two faced every day. The oven timer beeped, and Michael stood up. "I'll get the food." He went back to the kitchen and prepared plates with slices of roast turkey, stuffing, rice, potato salad, and pieces of panettone. He put everything on a tray and brought it to the living room, where he arranged the plates on the glass dining table. "Come and eat," he said. Sarah and Sophie approached the table as if in a trance. The sight of that food, that feast, was something they hadn't seen in a very long time. Sarah felt her eyes well up and blinked quickly, trying to hold back the emotion. They sat down and began to eat slowly, savoring every bite. Michael sat with them and ate a little too, but he was more interested in watching them. He saw the way Sarah chewed slowly, as if she wanted to make every piece last as long as possible. He saw how Sophie smiled with every bite, as if she were tasting the best banquet in the world. "This is yummy, Mommy," Sophie said, her mouth full. "Chew first, sweetie," Sarah gently chided, but she was smiling too. "Is it good?" Michael asked. "It's wonderful, sir," Sarah replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "You don't have to call me sir. You can call me Michael." Sarah nodded, but she knew she wouldn't be able to. It was too strange. He was the boss, the owner of the building, someone from another world. She was just the cleaning lady. This dinner was a moment of generosity, but it didn't change the reality of things. Or did it? Sophie ate until she couldn't anymore and then yawned, rubbing her eyes with her little hands. Sarah realized it was past 1 in the morning. "I'm sorry, we have to go now," she said, starting to get up. "Wait," Michael said. "Are you going to take the bus at this hour?" "Yeah, there's one that runs through the city late at night," Sarah explained, though she knew they would have to walk a long way to the stop, wait on a dark, cold street, and then face another walk to their tenement. "No, I'll call a car service to take you," Michael said, already pulling out his phone. "You don't have to, sir. It's far," Sarah protested. "It doesn't matter. No one should be on the street at this hour, especially not with a child." Before Sarah could protest again, Michael had already made the call and asked a trusted driver to pick them up and take them to whatever address she gave. Sarah didn't know whether to thank him or feel even more ashamed. She was accepting too many favors from a stranger. That wasn't good. But looking at Sophie, sleepy and satisfied, she felt she had made the right choice. For one night, at least, her daughter had had a real Christmas. 15 minutes later, the intercom buzzed. The driver had arrived. Michael walked them to the elevator. Sarah held Sophie's hand tightly, as if afraid that all of this would disappear at any moment. "Thank you for everything," Sarah said when the elevator arrived. "That was very kind of you." "It was nothing," Michael replied. And it was true. It had been nothing. Just leftover food and an available car. But at the same time, it felt like it had been so much more. It felt like it had been something important, something he couldn't name. Sophie let go of her mother's hand for a moment and ran to Michael. She hugged his leg tightly, pressing her face against the fabric of his suit. "Thank you for dinner," she said. "It was the best Christmas of my life." Michael stood frozen. He didn't know what to do. He wasn't used to hugs, to displays of affection, to that kind of human connection. But hesitantly, he placed his hand on the girl's head, gently stroking her straight brown hair. "You're welcome, Soph," he said, his voice softer than he intended. Sarah pulled her daughter back, murmuring an apology, and they both stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, and Michael stood there, alone in the silent hallway, with the strange feeling that something had changed. He went back to the empty apartment. The table still had the dirty plates, the remnants of the dinner, the signs that here, for a few hours, there had been life. There had been human warmth. There had been something, other than silence. Michael collected the plates and took them to the kitchen. He stood at the sink, his hands resting on the cold countertop, looking out the window at the illuminated city. And for the first time in many years, he felt something he couldn't identify. It wasn't exactly happiness, but it wasn't the usual emptiness either. It was something in between, something that ached and warmed him at the same time. He thought of Sophie, of the unexpected hug, of the girl's simple words. It was the best Christmas of my life. She was 5 years old, and that had been the best Christmas of her life. A simple dinner, a decorated tree, a moment of attention. Michael closed his eyes, and for the first time since losing his brother, allowed himself to feel. He allowed himself to remember what it was like to be connected to someone, what it was like to care. And in that instant, without knowing it yet, he made the decision that would change not only Sarah and Sophie's lives, but his own as well. He wasn't just going to forget this night. He wasn't going to let it end here. Something inside him, something that had been dormant for years, had awakened. And now that it was awake, It wouldn't be going back to sleep. December 24th dawned cold in New York. Sarah woke with a start to her alarm clock ringing at 5:30 in the morning, as always. For a moment, still drowsy, she thought the previous night had been just a dream. The dinner in the penthouse, the kind businessman, the beautiful Christmas tree. But then she looked at Sophie sleeping beside her on the thin mattress on the floor, and she saw the little girl had a serene smile on her face. It wasn't a dream. It had happened. Sarah got up slowly, trying not to wake her daughter. The one-room tenement where they lived was tiny, with plywood walls, a corrugated tin roof, and a cracked concrete floor. It had a small sink, a two-burner stove, an old refrigerator that made a lot of noise, and the mattress where they both slept. Outside, there was a shared bathroom down the hall that they used along with 3 other families. It wasn't much. In fact, it was almost nothing. But it was what Sarah could afford on a cleaner's salary, $1,000 a month, working 10, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. It barely covered the $800 rent, the utilities, the water, the food. There was never anything left over. Something was always missing. Sarah made some weak coffee and heated 2 slices of day-old bread in a pan. That was breakfast. Sophie woke up to the smell and rubbed her eyes, sitting up on the mattress. "Good morning, my love," Sarah said, forcing a smile. "Come eat." The two ate in silence, sitting on the floor using wooden crates as a table. Sarah looked at her daughter and felt a tightness in her chest. After last night's dinner, returning to this reality hurt even more. It was as if they had tasted a different world, a world where nothing was lacking, and now they had to accept scarcity again. Sophie, always observant, noticed the sadness in her mother's eyes. "Mommy, are you mad?" "No, sweetie. Why would I be mad?" "Because we took the dinner from that man yesterday. Mrs. Davis always says it's not good to take favors from strangers." Sarah sighed. Mrs. Davis, their neighbor, was a 60-year-old widow who had raised 5 children on her own and was now taking care of her grandkids. She was wise, suspicious, but had a good heart. And she was right. Accepting favors could create debts, obligations, expectations. But Sarah didn't regret it. She couldn't regret seeing her daughter happy, even if it was just for one night. "Sometimes we accept help when we need it, Soph, and we needed it yesterday," Sarah explained. "But that doesn't mean we're going to keep asking for more, okay? It was just one time." "Okay, Mommy." But deep down, Sarah knew she couldn't stop thinking about that man. Michael Sterling. He had been kind, but there was something more. Something in the way he looked at Sophie, as if he were seeing something that touched him deeply. Sarah didn't know what it was, but she felt it wasn't just passing kindness. It was something more complex. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Michael woke up in his empty penthouse with a strange feeling. He had slept better than he had in months. He didn't have the usual nightmares, didn't wake up in the middle of the night with his mind full of worries. He had slept soundly, and when he woke up, the first thing that came to his mind was the image of Sophie hugging his leg. He got up, went to the kitchen, and made a strong coffee. He sat at the table where, hours before, he had dined with Sarah and Sophie. The apartment seemed even emptier now, quieter, colder. Michael picked up his phone and, almost without thinking, opened his messaging app. He typed a message to Susan, his executive assistant. "I need information on an employee named Sarah, works on the building's cleaning crew. I want to know her address and if she has any children on record." Susan replied, minutes later. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling. I'll check and get back to you shortly." Michael drank his coffee, looking out the window. It was Christmas Day. The traffic was lighter than usual, the streets less crowded. It was a day when people were supposed to be with their families, celebrating, being happy. But he was here, alone, thinking about a woman and a little girl he barely knew. Why did he care? It didn't make sense. He had built an empire precisely by being pragmatic, rational, by not letting emotions get in the way of decisions. But there was something about this situation that bothered him. It wasn't pity, it was something else. It was as if, in seeing Sarah and Sophie, he had seen something he recognized, something that reminded him of himself. When Gabriel was still alive, Michael had been different. Lighter, more human. Gabriel was 5 years younger and had a magnetic personality. He was funny, optimistic, always saw the bright side of things. Michael took care of him, protected him, and in return, he received the light that Gabriel radiated. But Gabriel was gone. Driving on the highway, coming back from a weekend trip, a truck lost control and swerved into his lane. Gabriel didn't have time to react. The loss was instant, and with it, Michael also lost the will to feel anything. He built walls around his heart. He focused on work, on numbers, on success. And it worked. The company grew, the money came, so did the power. But the loneliness grew with it. And slowly, Michael became a hollow version of himself, a successful but empty man. Until, the night before, a 5-year-old girl hugged his leg and thanked him for dinner. And that hug created a small crack in the wall he had built. His phone vibrated. It was Susan. "Found the data, sir. Sarah Williams, 32 years old, has been with us for 8 months. Salary of $1,000 a month. She has one registered daughter, Sophie, 5 years old. Address 423, Flower Street, Hunts Point, the Bronx. It's an address in an unregistered housing area." Michael read the message twice. $1,000. It was less than he spent on a single meal at a restaurant. It was less than the coffee he drank every day cost. This woman was supporting a child on $1,000 a month in New York City, one of the most expensive cities in the country. He knew he shouldn't get involved. He knew it could complicate things, create expectations, cause problems. But there was something stronger than reason, something he couldn't ignore. A voice inside him that said, "Do something." Michael got dressed quickly. Jeans, a polo shirt, sneakers. He grabbed his car keys and went down to the building's garage. He had a black Mercedes parked in his reserved spot, but today wasn't a day for a luxury car. He took the most discreet SUV he owned and drove out onto the still empty streets of New York. He drove aimlessly for a few minutes, thinking. What was he going to do? He couldn't just show up at Sarah's house. It would be invasive, strange. But at the same time, he felt he had to do something concrete. He passed a toy store that by some miracle was open even on Christmas Day. He parked and went inside. The store was small but well organized, with shelves full of dolls, cars, and games. Michael looked around, not knowing exactly what he was looking for. A saleswoman approached him. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for a gift for a 5-year-old girl," Michael said. "Anything specific?" "I don't know. Something she'll like." The saleswoman smiled. "All girls this age love dolls. We have this one, look, it's a very delicate cloth doll. And we also have these building block sets, which are educational." Michael looked at the cloth doll. It was simple, with a colorful calico dress, yarn hair, and a painted smile on its face. It wasn't the most expensive doll in the store, nor the most modern, but there was something special about it, something comforting. "I'll take this one," he said. "Great choice. Would you like me to gift wrap it?" "Please." As the saleswoman wrapped the doll in colorful paper, Michael felt a growing anxiety. What was he doing? Buying a gift for a girl he barely knew? This was crazy, but at the same time it felt like the right thing to do. He paid, took the wrapped gift, and went back to his car. He placed the present on the passenger seat and sat there, his hands on the steering wheel, thinking about his next move. Going to Sarah's house would be too much. But what if he went back to the building and left the gift there? Sarah would probably work again on Monday. He could leave the gift with security, with a note. But no, that was too cold, too distant. If he was going to do this, he had to do it right. He had to deliver it in person. Michael picked up his phone and called Susan again. "I need you to find out if Sarah is working today." "Today? It's Christmas, sir." "I know, but she might be on call or have an extra shift. Find out, please." Susan called back 10 minutes later. "She's not working today. She's off until Monday." "Thanks." Michael hung up and stared at the gift on the seat next to him. Now he had no excuse. If he wanted to give the present to Sophie, he would have to go to her house. He would have to invade that space, that privacy. But something inside him, that insistent voice, said, "Go." He typed the address into his GPS and started driving. He left the upscale area of Park Avenue, took the FDR Drive, crossed the bridge, and entered the Bronx. The scenery changed gradually. The tall, glass-walled buildings gave way to simple houses, tenements, and unpaved streets. The GPS led him to Hunts Point, a neighborhood of informal housing, where buildings were built one on top of the other, with electrical wires crisscrossing the sky like spiderwebs. Michael parked the car on a main street and continued on foot, following the GPS directions. Flower Street was actually a narrow, unpaved alley, with puddles of dirty water and trash piled up on the sides. The buildings were tenements made of wood and unplastered brick, with makeshift roofs and old doors. He felt his heart ache. Sarah and Sophie lived here, in this place where everything was lacking, where there was no security, no sanitation, no infrastructure. It was a world completely different from his. And yet, on that Christmas night, Sarah had maintained her dignity, her politeness, her respect. He found the number 423. It was a plywood-sided tenement with a faded green door and a small window with a patterned fabric curtain. Michael stood in front of the door holding the gift, not knowing whether to knock or not. Before he could decide, the door opened. Sarah appeared, holding a laundry basket, and froze when she saw him. "Mr. Sterling?" Michael was also at a loss for a moment. "Hi, Sarah." "What? What are you doing here?" she asked, confused and clearly embarrassed. "How did you find my address?" I'm sorry. I know this is invasive, but I brought something for Sophie." Michael held up the wrapped gift, showing it to her. Sarah looked at the package and then at Michael, her eyes wide. "You didn't have to do that." "I know, but I wanted to." At that moment, Sophie appeared behind her mother, peeking out. When she saw Michael, the girl's eyes lit up. "It's the dinner man!" she exclaimed excitedly. Michael smiled. "Hi, Soph. I brought something for you." He held out the gift. Sophie looked at her mother, asking for permission. Sarah was torn. Accepting this was crossing a line. It was turning one night's kindness into something more. But how could she deny her daughter? How could she say no when Sophie already had that sparkle in her eyes? "Okay, you can take it," Sarah said softly. Sophie took the package carefully, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. She opened it slowly, tearing the paper gently, and when she saw the cloth doll, she let out a cry of joy. "A dolly! Mommy, look! A dolly!" Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. She had never been able to buy a doll for her daughter. There had never been enough money for that. And now, here was this man, practically a stranger, giving Sophie what she had never been able to give. Sophie hugged the doll tightly and then ran to Michael, hugging his leg again, just as she had the night before. Thank you, thank you, she repeated, her voice overflowing with happiness. Michael, once again, didn't know what to do. But this time he knelt down to the girl's level and stroked her hair. You're welcome, Soph. Take good care of her, okay? I'll take care of her forever. Michael stood up and looked at Sarah. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her face without her doing anything to wipe them away. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you upset, he said, concerned. Sarah shook her head, trying to find words. You don't know what this means to her. To us. I've never been able to give my daughter anything like this. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. You had no obligation to do this. And yet you did. Why? Sarah asked, her voice thick with emotion. Michael hesitated. He didn't know how to explain. How to say that seeing Sophie happy had lit something inside him that had been extinguished for years. How to explain that this little girl had touched a part of his soul he thought was dead. Because I wanted to, was all he could manage to say. There was an awkward silence. Michael looked around, seeing the poverty of the place, the harshness of this life. He wanted to do more. He wanted to really help. But he knew he had to be careful. He couldn't just show up offering money. That would wound Sarah's pride. He knew that. Can I come in? Michael asked. Sarah blinked, surprised. Here? You want to come in here? If you'll let me. Sarah looked inside the tenement, at the exposed poverty, the mattress on the floor, the few makeshift pieces of furniture. She was ashamed. But at the same time, something inside her wanted to let him in. She wanted to show him that, despite everything, she kept that space clean, organized, dignified. You can come in, she said, stepping away from the door. Michael entered and had to duck his head to avoid hitting the low door frame. The inside was even smaller than it looked from the outside. Everything fit into a single room, the sleeping area, the makeshift kitchen, a corner with a few of Sophie's old toys. But it was clean, impeccable. Sarah had transformed this poverty into something dignified through order and care. It's small, but it's ours, Sarah said, trying to hide her shame. It's well kept, Michael said, and it was true. You do a good job here. I do what I can. Sophie sat on the mattress and started playing with the doll, already creating imaginary stories and dialogues. Michael and Sarah stood there, not knowing exactly what to say. Does Sophie go to school? Michael asked suddenly. Sarah looked away. Not yet. I couldn't get her a spot. What if I helped with that? Sarah looked at him, suspicious. What do you mean? I have connections. I can get her a spot in a good school, public or private. I can't afford private, sir. I'll pay. Sarah turned pale. No, you've already done too much. I can't accept anything else. Why not? Because I don't want to owe anyone anything. Because it creates obligations. And because I don't know what your intentions are, Sarah said, her voice firm despite her fear. Michael understood her distrust. My intention is to help a child get an education. That's it. I don't want anything in return, Sarah. I don't expect anything from you. I just want Sophie to have the chance she deserves. Sarah felt the barrier she had built begin to crack. But it's not fair. Why do you care so much about us? We're nobody to you. You're not nobody, Michael said, and there was an intensity in his voice that Sarah had never heard before. You're important. I can't explain why, but you are. Sarah was silent, processing that. There was sincerity in his words. She could feel it. But it was still scary. It was dangerous to depend on someone's kindness. Life had taught her that people did favors expecting something in return. Always. I need to think about it, was all she said. Michael nodded. Okay, think about it, but the offer still stands. He stayed for a few more minutes, playing with Sophie, asking questions about the doll, listening to the stories the girl made up. And slowly, Sarah began to relax. She began to realize that he didn't have ulterior motives, or at least not the ulterior motives she feared. When Michael finally said goodbye and left, Sarah stood at the door, watching him walk down the alley back to his car. Sophie was inside, hugging the doll, humming softly. Sarah closed the door and rested her forehead against the wood. taking a deep breath. What was happening? Who was this man? Why did he care? And more importantly, what should she do? She had no answers, but for the first time in many years, Sarah felt something she had forgotten existed. Hope. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. That there was a way out of this life of scarcity and pain. That night, Sarah lay down next to Sophie on the thin mattress. The girl was asleep, hugging the doll, a serene smile on her face. Sarah looked at her daughter and made a silent promise. If this man was offering an opportunity for Sophie to have a better life, she was going to take it. Even if she was scared, even with the uncertainty, because a mother's love was greater than her pride. And as Sarah made this decision, on the other side of the city, Michael was sitting on the sofa in his penthouse, looking at the Christmas tree. He thought about Sophie, the hug, the smile. He thought about Sarah, the strength of that woman, the quiet dignity she carried. He had made a decision, too. He wasn't just going to give her a doll and walk away. He was going to do more. He was going to make sure that little girl had the childhood she deserved. And in the process, maybe he could recover something he had lost a long time ago. Maybe he could remember what it felt like for his life to have a purpose beyond accumulating money. A real purpose. A human purpose. January arrived, bringing the biting New York cold and changes Sarah could never have imagined. On the first Monday of the year, she received a phone call from Michael. His voice was formal, but there was a warmth hidden behind the carefully chosen words. "Sarah, I got a spot for Sophie at the Growing Together School in Queens. It's an excellent public school. Classes start next week." Sarah was stunned, the old cell phone trembling in her hand. "How did you manage that so quickly?" "I have some contacts at the Department of Education. I've helped with social projects in the past, and they owed me a favor," Michael explained. "Sophie is enrolled. You just need to bring her documents and have an initial meeting with the school counselor on Wednesday at 10 in the morning. But I work at that time. Take the day off. I'll authorize it." Sarah swallowed hard. "Are you my boss?" "Technically, yes. I own the company, and I'm giving you the day off to take your daughter to school." There was a pause. Sarah knew she should thank him, but the words wouldn't come out. She was torn between gratitude and the fear of creating a dangerous dependency. "Sarah, I know this is strange for you. I know you don't trust easily, but I swear I have no ulterior motives. I just want to help," Michael said, as if he were reading her thoughts. "Why?" Sarah asked for the second time. "Why us?" There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Michael answered with a sincerity that caught her off guard. "Because when I saw you two that night on Christmas Eve, you reminded me that there's still goodness in the world. Sophie hugged me like I was important. It's been a long time since I've felt important to anyone." Sarah felt her chest tighten. She understood in that moment that this help wasn't coming from a place of superiority. It was coming from a place of loneliness. Michael was lonely, just like her. The difference was that he had money and she didn't, but they both knew the pain of lack. For him, it was a lack of human connection. For her, a lack of resources to give her daughter what she deserved. "Okay," Sarah said finally. "I accept, but on one condition." "What's that?" "I want to pay you back. Someday. When I can. Even if it takes years." "Sarah, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. For myself, I need to. Let me have that dignity." Michael was silent for a moment and then agreed. "Okay, someday you'll pay me back if it makes you feel better." "It does." After that phone call, everything began to change quickly. Sarah took Sophie to the school on Wednesday. The Growing Together School was a modern, colorful building with spacious classrooms and a playground full of toys. Sophie's jaw dropped when she saw it. There were other boys and girls running, laughing, playing. There were smiling teachers, new school supplies, books. The school counselor, a gray-haired woman named Beatrice, welcomed them warmly. "Sophie will adjust very well here," she said, after talking with the girl for a few minutes. "She's curious, smart. She'll learn quickly." Sarah signed all the necessary papers with trembling hands. This was real. Her daughter was going to a real school. She would have teachers, friends, lunch, a uniform. She would have a chance. When they left the school, Sophie couldn't stop talking. "Mommy, did you see the classrooms? And the books? And there's a playground. Can I play on the playground?" "You can, sweetie. You can play on everything." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She stayed awake looking at Sophie, who was sleeping, hugging the cloth doll Michael had given her. A part of her was still afraid that this was temporary, afraid that Michael would disappear from their lives as quickly as he had appeared. But another part, a part that was starting to grow, allowed itself to believe that good things could happen, that not everything was a struggle and pain. The following week, Sophie started school. Sarah took her every day by bus, a journey of almost 2 hours each way. They woke up at 5 in the morning, took 2 buses, and Sophie arrived at school at 8. At the end of the day, Sarah picked her up at 5 in the afternoon, and they made the journey back. It was exhausting, but it was worth it. Sophie was radiant. She came home talking about her classes, the friends she was making, the activities. Michael appeared again in the 3rd week of January. This time he came to the building where Sarah worked and asked to speak with her during her lunch break. Sarah was nervous when she saw him, but he greeted her with a gentle smile. "How is Sophie adjusting to school?" "Very well, she loves it. She won't stop talking about it." "I'm glad. And you? How are you?" Sarah hesitated. "I'm fine. Tired, but fine." "Tired why?" "Because the school is far. We wake up very early and get home very late." Michael frowned. "How long is the commute?" "Almost 2 hours to get there, 2 to get back." "Every day?" Sarah nodded. Michael was silent, processing that. 4 hours of travel a day. Sarah and Sophie spent 4 hours on crowded buses in chaotic New York traffic, and Sarah still worked 10 hours a day. It wasn't sustainable. It would kill her with exhaustion. "Sarah, I need to make you a proposal," Michael said after a moment. "What proposal?" "I need a new receptionist at the office. The one we have is moving to another state. The salary is $2,500 a month with full benefits. Transit pass, meal allowance, health insurance. And the hours are 9 to 6 Monday to Friday. No Saturdays, no overtime." Sarah was in shock. $2,500? That was more than double what she was making now. And with fixed hours, benefits, weekends off. It seemed too good to be true. "Are you offering me the job?" she asked, incredulous. "I am. If you'll accept it." "But I don't have any experience as a receptionist. I've only ever done cleaning." "You'll learn. It's a simple job. Answering phones, greeting visitors, organizing schedules. You can handle it." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. She desperately wanted to accept, but at the same time she was afraid. Afraid that it was a trap. Afraid that Michael would expect something in return. Afraid of being humiliated, demeaned, of discovering that favors always come with a hidden price. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Why are you helping me so much?" Michael looked into her eyes. "Because I can. Because I want to. And because you deserve it, Sarah. You work hard. You take care of your daughter alone. You maintain your dignity even when everything is difficult. You deserve a chance to live better. And what do you want in return?" "Nothing. I don't want anything in return. I just want you to accept the help without being afraid. Trust me, just this once." Sarah closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. This man was changing her life and Sophie's. He was offering things she had never imagined having. A better job, a decent salary, benefits, and he wasn't asking for anything in return. It was hard to believe. But looking at Michael, at the sincerity on his face, Sarah decided to take a leap of faith. "I accept," she said, her voice firm. "I accept the job." Michael smiled, and it was a genuine smile that lit up his face. "Great. You start next Monday. I'll have Susan, my assistant, give you all the details." And just like that, Sarah's life changed completely. The following Monday, she reported to the Sterling financial office on the 15th floor of the building where she used to clean the floors. Susan, an elegant and efficient woman in her 40s, received her professionally. "You'll be working at the main reception," Susan explained, showing her a large desk with a computer, phone, and a comfortable chair. "Your duties are to answer calls, direct visitors, schedule meetings for the directors, and keep the entrance area organized. It's a job that requires attention and courtesy. Do you think you can do it?" Sarah looked at the desk, at the new computer, at the view from the window that showed Park Avenue below. She could feel the air conditioning, smell the fresh coffee, hear the organized silence of the office. It was a completely different world from what she knew. "Yes, I can," Sarah said, trying to sound confident. Susan spent the first few hours teaching Sarah how to use the phone system, how to transfer calls, how to schedule on the digital calendar, how to receive visitors. Sarah absorbed everything like a sponge, taking notes, asking questions, paying attention to every detail. At the end of the first day, she was mentally exhausted, but it was a different kind of exhaustion from what she felt after scrubbing floors for hours. It was the exhaustion of learning, of growing, of being in a new place. Michael passed by the reception in the mid-afternoon. "How was the first day?" "Hard, but good," Sarah replied, smiling shyly. "I'm learning. You'll do great. I'm sure of it." And he was right. Sarah adapted quickly. She learned to use the computer with Susan's help, memorized the names of the main directors and clients, and developed a polite and professional way of answering the phone. In 2 weeks, she was already comfortable in the role, and for the first time in many years, Sarah looked at herself in the office bathroom mirror and saw something different. She didn't just see exhaustion, she saw a woman who was being reborn. She bought new clothes with her first paycheck. Nothing expensive, but decent clothes that made her feel presentable. She bought a new backpack for Sophie, with a unicorn print that the girl had asked for. She was able to pay all her bills on time and still have a little left over. For the first time, there was a surplus at the end of the month. Not much, but enough for Sarah to feel like she was starting to climb out of the hole. Sophie was flourishing too. The girl had become popular at school, always smiling, always excited. She brought home drawings to show her mother, told stories about her friends, about her teachers. And every night, before going to sleep, she would say, "Thank you. Thank you, Mommy, for putting me in school. It's the coolest place in the world." Sarah would hug her daughter and feel her heart overflow. All of this was possible because of Michael. That strange, lonely man who had appeared in their lives on Christmas Eve and had changed everything. Michael, for his part, was also changing. He started visiting Sarah and Sophie regularly. At first, they were short visits, always with some excuse. He brought school supplies for Sophie. He brought clothes that one of his employees was getting rid of and thought Sarah could use. He brought children's books for Sophie to practice her reading. But slowly, the visits stopped being about delivering things. They became about being present. Michael started having lunch with Sarah and Sophie on Saturdays. He took them for walks in Central Park, where Sophie would run on the grass and Michael would push her on the swings. They went to the zoo, where Sophie was fascinated by the monkeys and elephants. They went to the aquarium, where the girl pressed her face against the glass to see the colorful fish swim by. And slowly, a bond formed. A bond that went beyond financial help, beyond charity. It was something deeper. It was as if the three of them were building something together, a kind of makeshift family. Sarah noticed the change in Michael. He smiled more. He talked more. He had a sparkle in his eyes that wasn't there before. And Sophie adored him. She called him Uncle Mike, a nickname she had come up with on her own. Michael, who had never been close to children, found himself enjoying that role. He liked listening to Sophie's stories, answering her endless questions, seeing the world through her eyes. One Saturday afternoon, the three of them were sitting on a lawn in the park, having an impromptu picnic. Sophie was playing with her cloth doll while Sarah and Michael talked. "Thank you," Sarah said suddenly. Michael looked at her. "For what?" "For everything, for changing our lives. I never imagined things could be different, and now they are." "You don't have to thank me, Sarah. This has been good for me, too." "How so?" Michael was silent for a moment, looking at Sophie. "I was very lonely, very lost. I worked all the time, but I didn't know for what. I accumulated money, but I had no one to share it with. And then I met you two. And for the first time in years, I felt like my life had meaning." Sarah felt her chest tighten. She looked at Michael, really looked, and saw not the rich businessman, not the boss, but a man, a hurt, needy man who was trying to reconnect with the world. And she understood that this wasn't about charity, it was about healing. Michael was healing himself by helping them, and they were healing him by accepting his help. "You're very important to us, too," Sarah said softly. "Sophie loves you, and I'm grateful you're here." Michael looked into her eyes, and there was something different in that look. Something Sarah couldn't name, but that made her feel a strange warmth in her chest. She quickly looked away, afraid of what it might mean. But before either of them could say anything more, Sophie came running back, interrupting the moment. Uncle Mike, come play tag with me." Michael smiled and stood up. "Let's go, but I'm warning you, I'm very fast." "No, you're not," Sophie shouted, laughing, and ran off. Michael ran after her, pretending to be slow to let her win. Sarah sat on the grass, watching them, and for the first time in many years, she allowed herself to dream. Not big dreams, not impossible fantasies. Just the dream that this peace, this happiness could last. But life, as always, had other plans. At the end of March, when everything seemed finally stable, when Sarah had gotten used to her new job, when Sophie was happy in school, when the bond between the three of them was solid, a threat emerged from the past. Sarah was working at the reception desk when she received a call on her personal cell phone. It was an unknown number. She answered hesitantly. "Hello? Sarah? It's me, your cousin Kevin." Sarah felt her blood run cold. Kevin, the distant cousin she hadn't seen in almost 7 years. The troubled cousin, who had disappeared from the family after a series of problems. The cousin who had never cared about her or Sophie. "Kevin," she said, her voice tense, "what do you want? I heard you're doing well for yourself now, that you're working in a fancy office, that your daughter's in a private school. Who told you that?" "I have my sources, and I also heard you're involved with a rich guy, a businessman." Sarah closed her eyes. Someone had seen her with Michael. Someone had told Kevin. And now he was calling, and that was not good news. "I'm not involved with anyone. He's just a friend who's helping me." "A friend?" Kevin let out a dry laugh. "Rich guys don't help anyone for free, Sarah. He wants something. And I'm worried about Sophie. A child shouldn't be exposed to a situation like that." "What situation?" "There is no situation." "Yes, there is, and I, as a blood relative, have a right to be concerned. In fact, I'm thinking of filing for custody of the girl. I think it would be better for her to be with me than in a house where her mother is selling herself to some rich guy." Sarah felt a wave of panic. Kevin didn't care about Sophie. He had never cared. He just wanted money. He wanted to blackmail her, to take advantage of the situation. "You're not going to touch my daughter," Sarah said, her voice trembling with anger. "We'll see what the court has to say about that," Kevin replied before hanging up. Sarah stood frozen, the phone still in her hand. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not when things were finally getting better. But it was. And she needed to tell Michael. She needed help. Because alone, with no money, for a lawyer, no knowledge of the law, she wouldn't be able to fight Kevin. That night, Sarah called Michael and told him everything, and for the first time since they had met, she heard anger in his voice. "He is not taking Sophie from you. I won't let him." The days following Kevin's phone call were the hardest Sarah had faced since meeting Michael. The threat hung over her like a dark cloud, stealing her sleep, robbing her appetite, turning every moment of peace into worry. Sophie noticed something was wrong and constantly asked if her mother was sick. Sarah would lie, saying she was just tired, but the girl knew. Children always know. Michael wasted no time. The morning after Sarah's call, he contacted Mark Shapiro, one of the best family law attorneys in New York. Mark was a bald, short man in his 50s, but he had a presence that filled any room. He had a firm voice and a direct way of speaking that inspired confidence. The meeting took place in Michael's office. Sarah was there, sitting in a leather chair, her hands sweating, her heart racing. Mark listened to the whole story attentively, making occasional notes on a yellow legal pad. "Does this Kevin have a criminal record?" Mark asked, when Sarah finished explaining everything. "I don't know. He was always a bit of a mess, but I never knew if he was arrested or anything." Mark looked at Michael. "I can run a background check. If he has any history that compromises his character, it will weigh heavily against his custody petition." "Do it," Michael said immediately. "I want to know everything about this man, where he lives, what he does for work, if he has debts, if he has any addictions, everything." Mark nodded. "I'll also need Sarah's documents, proof of income, address, Sophie's school records. We need to build a file showing that the child is in a healthy environment, that the mother is capable of caring for her, and that there is no threat to the girl's well-being." Sarah felt her stomach churn. This was becoming too real, too fast. The idea of having to go to court, of having to prove she was a good mother, of having to defend her right to keep her own daughter, was terrifying. Michael noticed the panic on her face and placed his hand over hers, a gentle gesture of comfort. "It's going to be okay, Sarah. I promise." She wanted to believe him. But fear was stronger than hope. In the following days, Mark worked quickly. He investigated Kevin and uncovered important information. Sarah's cousin had a complicated history. He had been sued twice for non-payment of debts, had been unemployed for 6 months, and was living with acquaintances. He had no stability to raise a child. But what weighed most heavily against him was an old report of involvement in illegal activities, though he had never been officially convicted. With this information, Mark built a solid defense. Sarah wasn't rich, but she was employed, had a steady income, lived in a humble but decent place, and most importantly, Sophie was happy, healthy, and doing well in school. Any judge with common sense would see that the girl was in a much better environment with her mother than she would be with a distant, unstable cousin. But Kevin didn't give up easily. He filed the custody petition with the court, alleging that Sarah was exposing Sophie to a risky situation by accepting help from a strange man. He insinuated, between the lines of the legal documents, that there was an inappropriate relationship between Sarah and Michael, and that this endangered the child. When Sarah read the allegations in the petition, she felt a deep humiliation. Kevin was saying, in formal legal terms, that she was a woman of no character, that she was selling her dignity for money and comfort. It was a lie, all of it. But there it was, written on official paper for anyone to read. Sarah cried that night. She cried for the injustice, for the malice, for the cruelty of someone who barely knew her life trying to destroy it like this. Sophie slept beside her, innocent, unaware that her future was being decided in courtrooms and documents. Michael went to Sarah's apartment that night, something he rarely did without calling first. He knocked on the door, and Sarah opened it, her eyes red and swollen. He said nothing, just pulled her into a hug, and Sarah allowed herself to break down, crying on his shoulder, letting out all the accumulated fear and anger. "I'm not going to let him take Sophie from you," Michael said, his voice firm against the top of her head. "I swear on everything that is sacred." "He will not succeed." Sarah pulled back a little, looking at his face. "Why are you doing all this? Why do you care so much?" Michael hesitated. It was a question he had asked himself many times. At first, he thought it was just kindness, just a desire to help someone in need. But over the months, he had realized it was much more than that. It was about belonging to something. It was about having a reason to wake up in the morning. It was about love, not the romantic love of movies, but a deep, true love that came from genuinely caring about someone's well-being. "Because you saved me," Michael said finally. "You don't know it, but you saved me. I was so lost, Sarah, so empty. And then I met you and Sophie, and you gave me something to live for. So it's not just about helping you, it's about saving myself too." Sarah felt fresh tears stream down her face, but this time they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of understanding, of connection. She squeezed Michael's hand tightly. "We're a strange family, aren't we?" "Yeah, but it's the best family I've ever had." The hearing in family court was scheduled for the end of April. Sarah was terrified. She had spent the previous week rehearsing what she would say, preparing herself mentally. But nothing seemed enough. What if the judge didn't believe her? What if the judge thought Kevin was right? What if she lost Sophie? Michael was by her side the entire time. On the day of the hearing, he picked her up from her apartment early, drove to the courthouse, and stayed with her in the waiting room. Mark was there too, reviewing documents, reassuring Sarah. "Breathe, be honest. Tell your truth. The judge will see that you're a good mother," Mark said. "But what if she doesn't?" "She will. Trust me. I've been doing this for 20 years. When the time came, Sarah entered the courtroom with her legs shaking. The judge was a middle-aged woman with her hair in a bun, thin-rimmed glasses, and a serious but not unkind expression. Her name was Judge Evans. Kevin was there, accompanied by a public defender. He wore a cheap, ill-fitting suit and an expression of false concern. Sarah felt a surge of anger seeing him. That man didn't care about Sophie. He had never cared. He just wanted money, power, control. The hearing began. Kevin spoke first, repeating the allegations from the petition. He said he was concerned for his niece's well-being, that he found it inappropriate for a child to be so close to a wealthy man with no family ties, that he feared for her safety and emotional development. Mark rebutted each point with precision. He presented the documents showing that Sarah had a steady job, a stable income, that Sophie was enrolled in a quality school and performing excellently. He also presented the information about Kevin, unemployed, no fixed address, with a problematic history. Then it was Sarah's turn to speak. She took the witness stand with her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone in the room could hear it. "Do you take good care of your daughter?" the judge asked, getting straight to the point. "Yes, Your Honor. Sophie is everything to me. I work hard every day to give her the best I can." "And regarding Mr. Michael Sterling, what is the nature of your relationship?" Sarah swallowed hard. "He's a friend who helped me when I needed it. There's nothing wrong with that. Mr. Kevin alleges there is an inappropriate relationship. There isn't. He helped me get a better job, helped enroll Sophie in school. but he never ever asked for anything in return. He has never behaved inappropriately. He is a man of character, who cares about my daughter's well-being." The judge asked a few more questions, all answered truthfully by Sarah. Then, she asked for Sophie to be brought into the room. The girl had been in a special waiting area with a child psychologist, drawing and playing. When Sophie entered, wearing her school uniform, her hair in 2 neat braids that Sarah had carefully made that morning, the judge smiled for the first time. "Hi, Sophie. My name is Patricia. Can I ask you a few questions?" Sophie looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes, ma'am." "Do you like living with your mom?" "I love it. Mommy is the best mom in the world." "And do you know your Uncle Kevin?" Sophie frowned. "No, I've never seen him." The judge glanced at Kevin, who looked away. "And do you know Mr. Michael?" "I do. He's Uncle Mike. He's really nice." "What do you do? Together?" "We go to the park, the zoo, the aquarium. He teaches me things, plays with me, helps me with my homework, and he gave me this doll." Sophie pointed to her backpack where the cloth doll was tucked away. "I love her. I love Uncle Mike too." The judge asked a few more questions, but it was clear that Sophie was happy, healthy, and safe. There were no signs of abuse, neglect, or any kind of problem. She was a normal, happy child who loved her mother and was fond of Michael. After Sophie left, the judge reviewed all, the documents again in silence. The silence in the room was heavy. Sarah could barely breathe. Finally, the judge took off her glasses and looked directly at Kevin. "Mr. Kevin, it is evident that your concern for the minor is not genuine. You have no contact with the child. You do not contribute in any way to her upbringing, and you lack the stability to assume her custody. Furthermore, the accusations you have made against the mother are unfounded and appear to be financially motivated." Kevin tried to protest, but the judge raised her hand, cutting him off. "As for you, Ms. Williams," the judge continued, "it is clear that you are a dedicated mother who works diligently to ensure your daughter's well-being. The child is healthy, happy, and in a suitable environment. The fact that you receive help from a friend does not constitute any kind of irregularity. On the contrary, it demonstrates that you have a support network, which is positive for the minor's development." Sarah felt tears begin to fall, but this time they were tears of relief. "Therefore," the judge banged her gavel, "the petition for custody is denied. Sophie will remain in the care of her mother, Sarah Williams. This case is closed." It was as if a ton of weight had been lifted from Sarah's shoulders. She covered her face with her hands and began to cry openly. Mark placed a hand on her shoulder in a congratulatory gesture. Michael, who had been waiting outside the courtroom, came in as soon as the session ended and hugged Sarah. "It's over. It's over," he said, and there was as much relief in his voice as in hers. Kevin left the room without looking back, defeated. Sarah never heard from him again. In the months that followed, the lives of Sarah, Sophie, and Michael found a new rhythm. The bond between the three of them grew even stronger. Michael became a constant presence in their lives, not as a benefactor, but as family. Sarah progressed at work. Susan, the executive assistant, was impressed with her dedication and efficiency and began teaching her about other areas of the company. Sarah discovered she had a talent for organization and planning. Gradually, her responsibilities increased. She was no longer just a receptionist. She was becoming an administrative assistant. Sophie continued to flourish at school. Her teachers praised her performance, her curiosity, her kindness to her classmates. The girl who, months ago, didn't even have a proper backpack, was now among the top students in her class. And Michael discovered something about himself he never imagined. He discovered he could be happy. He could wake up in the morning and feel eager to live the day. He could smile genuinely, laugh out loud, play. He could connect with people. He could love. But there was something unsaid between him and Sarah. A good tension, a feeling that was growing silently. They touched more, a hug that lasted a few seconds longer. Hands that met while pushing Sophie on the swing. Glances that held for longer than necessary. But neither of them had the courage to name it. Until Christmas came again. A full year since that Christmas Eve that had changed everything. Sarah and Sophie no longer lived in the tenement in the Bronx. With her better salary and a loan that Michael had helped her secure on favorable terms, Sarah had rented a small but decent apartment in Queens, near Sophie's school. 2 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, and a bathroom. It had second-hand furniture, but it was clean, organized, and welcoming. It was a real home. Sarah decorated the apartment for Christmas with what she had. She bought colorful ribbons and wrapping paper, and she and Sophie made origami stars to hang on the walls. They made a makeshift tree out of branches they found in the park, decorated with fabric bows and balls made of aluminum foil. It wasn't luxurious, but it was made with love. Michael was invited for Christmas dinner. Sarah had insisted. "You're part of our family," she said. "You have to be here." He accepted, happier than he let on. On Christmas night, the 3 of them sat at the living room table. Sarah had prepared a simple but hearty dinner. Rice, beans, roast chicken, stuffing, salad. She had bought a panettone and grape juice. It wasn't a rich person's feast, but it was their feast, and it was perfect. Sophie, now 6, made a toast with her glass of juice, raising it high. "I want to make a toast." Sarah and Michael raised their glasses too, smiling. "This was the best year of my life," Sophie said, her voice full of childish sincerity, "because now we don't just have a house. We have a family. We have Mommy, who works really hard and loves me. We have Uncle Mike, who is our friend forever. And we have each other. That's more important than any present." Sarah felt the tears coming again, but they were good tears. Michael was emotional too, his eyes shining. They toasted, clinked their glasses, and drank their juice. And then they ate, talked, and laughed. Sophie told them about the vacation she was going to have, about her school friends, about the books she was reading. Michael told them about a trip he wanted to take, to the coast, and invited them to come along. Sarah accepted, already imagining Sophie seeing the ocean for the first time. After dinner, Sophie got sleepy. Sarah took her to her room, helped her change, and tucked her into bed. Sophie hugged her cloth doll, now worn from so much play but still loved. "Mommy, I'm happy," Sophie said, her eyes already closing. "Me too, my love. Me too." "Good night, Mommy. Good night, Uncle Mike," the girl murmured, even though Michael was still in the living room. Sarah returned to the living room. Michael was sitting on the sofa looking at the makeshift tree, a soft smile on his face. Sarah sat next to him, leaving a small space between them. "Thanks for coming," she said. "Thanks for inviting me." There was a comfortable silence. Michael looked at Sarah and noticed how she had changed. Her face no longer had those deep lines of exhaustion. Her eyes sparkled. She smiled more, laughed more. She had bought new clothes, let her hair grow a little. She was beautiful. She always had been, but he was only now allowing himself to see it. "Sarah, I need to tell you something," Michael said suddenly. Sarah looked at him, curious. "What?" I'm not good with words. Never have been. But this past year with you and Sophie has been the best year of my life, too. And I've realized that I don't want this to be just a friendship. I want to be a real part of your family. I want to be here not because I feel obligated, but because I can't imagine my life without you." Sarah's heart started to race. "What are you saying?" Michael took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you, Sarah, and with Sophie. With this life we've built together. You don't have to answer now. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know." Sarah was silent, processing. She had felt something growing inside her too, but she had been afraid to name it. She was afraid it was gratitude, debt, confusion. But looking at Michael now, holding his hand, feeling the warmth, the sincerity, she knew it wasn't confusion. It was love, a love that had been born from empathy, from care, from presence, a real love. "I've fallen in love with you too," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "But I was scared. Scared that you just felt sorry for me, scared that this wasn't real." "It's real, Sarah. It's the most real thing I've ever felt in my life." They looked at each other, and then slowly they moved closer. The kiss was soft, careful, full of unspoken promises. It wasn't a movie kiss, dramatic and perfect. It was a kiss between two people who had found in each other something they had been searching for without knowing it. When they pulled apart, Sarah rested her head on Michael's shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. They stayed like that, embraced, in silence, listening to the distant sound of fireworks in the neighborhood. "This isn't going to be easy," Sarah said after a while. "People will talk. They'll say I married you for your money, that you were foolish, that we're from different worlds." "Let them talk. I don't care what people think." "I do, but I'll try not to." Michael smiled. "We'll figure it out together. No rush, no pressure." "Okay." No rush. Time passed. Michael didn't move into Sarah's apartment right away. They wanted to do things right. Respect Sophie's pace, build their relationship on a solid foundation. But he was there every day. He took Sophie to school when Sarah had an early meeting. He helped with homework. He had dinner with them several times a week. And slowly, the three of them became what they were always meant to be, a family. Not a traditional family, not a family that fit into conventional molds, but a real family, made of choice, of commitment, of love. Sophie called Michael Dad for the first time the following March. It was an accident during a walk in the park. "Dad, look at that dog!" And then she realized what she had said and turned red. "Sorry, Uncle Mike, Michael knelt in front of her, his eyes misty. "You can call me Dad if you want. It would be an honor." "Really? Really?" Sophie hugged him tightly. "Then you're my dad now." "I am. And you're my daughter. And your mom is—" Michael looked at Sarah, who was watching the scene with tears streaming down her face. "Your mom is the love of my life." Sarah joined the hug. The three of them stood there in the middle of the park, hugging, crying, and laughing at the same time. And around them, life went on. People passed by, children played, dogs ran. But for the three of them in that moment, there was nothing else. Only the love they had found in each other, the love that had saved them all. A year later, Michael and Sarah got married. It was a simple ceremony at the city clerk's office, with only a few friends and colleagues present. Sarah wore a simple white dress she had bought at a department store. Sophie was the flower girl with a crown of flowers in her hair. And when the justice of the peace declared Michael and Sarah husband and wife, Sophie clapped so loudly that everyone in the room laughed. They moved into a larger apartment in a good neighborhood, with 3 bedrooms, a spacious living room, and a balcony with a view of the sunset. Sophie got her own room, which Michael helped decorate with unicorn wallpaper and shelves full of books. Sarah continued to work at the company, but now as an administrative manager. She had taken night classes, earned certifications, and grown professionally. She was no longer the invisible cleaning lady. She was a respected professional. Michael sold the empty penthouse where he had lived alone for so many years. He no longer needed that cold, impersonal space. He had a home now, a home full of life, laughter, and love. And every night before going to sleep, Michael would go into Sophie's room to say goodnight. The girl always waited for this ritual. "Dad, tell me a story." And he would. Made-up stories about brave princesses, kind knights, and dragons who just needed a friend. And Sophie would listen with shining eyes, hugging the cloth doll he had given her that Christmas years ago. Afterward, Michael would go to the room he shared with Sarah. She would be there, reading a book or looking at something on her phone. He would lie down next to her, pull her close, and they would stay like that, embraced, in silence. And Michael would think about how strange life was, how he had spent years building an empire, accumulating wealth, seeking success, only to find out in the end that none of it mattered. What mattered was this moment, this woman by his side, this little girl sleeping in the, next room, this family he had found on the most unlikely of nights. And Sarah would think about how strong she had been for so long, how she had fought alone, without asking for help, without expecting anything from anyone, and how hard it had been to accept that she needed help, that she deserved help, that she could trust someone. But she had accepted, and that had changed everything. And Sophie, in her room full of dreams, slept peacefully, because she had a mother who loved her, a father who chose her, and a future full of possibilities, and because she knew, even without being able to put it into words, that true love wasn't about blood or biological ties. It was about choice, about being present, about caring. And she had that. She had all of it. The next Christmas arrived. They were in the living room of their new apartment with a real tree, bought from a store, decorated with beautiful ornaments. But at the very top of the tree, in place of the traditional star, was one of the paper stars that Sarah and Sophie had made that first Christmas together in the small apartment. Why? Sophie had asked when Michael placed the star on top. "Because this star represents us," he explained. "It's not perfect, it's not the prettiest, but it was made with love, and that's what matters." Sarah hugged Michael from behind, resting her face on his back. Sophie joined the hug, wrapping her arms around both of them, and there, in that moment, they were complete. Not because they had everything, but because they had each other, and that was more than enough. It was everything.